Hey guys, today we're going to jump into a subject that can be semi-controversial for people. We're going to be talking about spurs. There's a lot of misinformation out there about spurs and their use and that sort of thing. And we had one of our Patreon members ask a question about why do you use spurs, what's the purpose of it, and we're going to jump into all of that in this video. So the first thing I want to jump into talking about is spurs and why do I use spurs. So first of all, you don't have to use spurs. If you don't want to use spurs, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It is pretty easy to have your horse be dull to your leg and teach him to wear the pressure, because your just blunt heel without a spur on it is very tempting for a horse to lean on. It's not a lot of pressure. And you could ride with a little stick there, and that would help get that horse lightened up to that. So that's totally a viable option. And there's a lot of people that I recommend that. If I don't trust the rider's legs, in my opinion, you have to earn your spurs. You have to be aware enough and good enough with how you use your leg and when you use it, and how much you can control your leg during cantering and changing directions and different transitions that come up while you're riding, in order for me to say, yes, you should be wearing spurs. So a lot of riders don't need spurs. You know, if you're cantering and you're worried that if your horse spooks or bobbles or does something that you might accidentally squeeze with both legs, you shouldn't be wearing spurs, because that could end up getting yourself bucked off and putting more pressure on the horse than you meant to. Spurs are for refined communication. That's the simple answer of it. You know, when I'm riding a horse, I teach them 3 leg positions. And by having a spur and a specific point that I'm touching the horse, it becomes very easy to distinguish the difference between leg position 1, 2, and 3. The next thing is the spur is a very small point compared to just the rider's heel. You know, if you compared the heel to my palm of my hand, you know, if I just push with just the palm of my hand, it's pretty easy to lean on. But if I press here, this is not as easy to lean on. It's not painful, but a horse could not want to lean on this a little bit quicker. Same reason we use a rope halter versus a nylon web halter. So spurs are for refined communication and to keep the horse from learning to lean on pressure. They're not for going faster and jabbing your horse and making it uncomfortable and abusive things. You know, I'm sure a lot of people in the comments are going to share their opinions on spurs, and everybody's entitled to their opinion on spurs. But as with so many things with horses, it's more about how you use the tool and the feel and the timing behind it, more so than the tool itself. You know, a lot of horses are tortured in tools that a lot of people would consider to be a gentle tool, like a snaffle bit or a round pen or something like that. You know, if I just went in a round pen, you would think, oh, it's no big deal, he's just going in a round pen. I've seen a lot of horses get abused in round pens because the person doesn't know how to use them correctly, and they're just using that space to force things onto a horse. Same thing with tying a horse up, or same thing with riding him in a snaffle bit. I've seen more horses abused in snaffle bits than any other bit, where a lot of people would look at shanked bits and bridles as being the severe ones. But it's again, a lot of people just don't know the difference. So the feel and the timing behind it is the most important thing. Now let's talk about the differences. So if you were thinking about getting into riding with spurs and you're ready to advance your horse, I would recommend getting a spur similar to this one. So I've kind of placed these spurs in lowest amount of pressure to most amount of pressure. So this is a set of spurs that one of my interns was using so I went and grabbed these from him. You can see they have a really short shank, which means the rider's really going to have to deliberately turn their toe out and push down to finally apply that. You know, they really are going to have to deliberately use it. They're not going to accidentally bump the horse with this, really, because it has such a short shank, and you can see how rounded this is. It's very smooth. You know, it doesn't hurt at all. You know, to put pressure on there. These are spurs that I use on a day-to-day basis. They have a really big rowel, and a lot of people go, oh, because it's a big rowel, that spur must be a lot of pressure. It's actually the opposite. Because it's such a big rowel, it creates more surface area. So it's actually going to be a lot less pressure. So if I just press with this, it covers a lot of surface area. All these points are obviously dull, and I kind of like the sound of it. And so the real reason I like these spurs is they have a good sing to them when you're walking around. So maybe that's not the best reason to use these spurs, but I like them for that reason. So next up, we have an English set of spurs that my wife uses with her horse. These particular ones have a little roller to them here. And I would say that the little roller makes it more gentle than if this was just a stud or a stub that came out from them. So because it rolls a little bit, it makes it easier. But again, you can see the person would have to real obviously use these spurs and turn their toe out. So it's a lot less about the horse leaning on the leg. Now also typically, she's a dressage rider and she's mostly training in dressage when she rides. She also has a little riding stick. So if she's trying to build more energy in the horse, she's not going to use these, she's going to use the stick and tap the horse. And again, it's interesting to me that a lot of people would get up in arms about people riding with a spur when really that's not what she's creating life with. She's using that to make sure her horse doesn't learn to lean on her leg so that she can keep her legs off the horse more. Kind of an interesting thing. Then next up we have another set of spurs. Now one of the things that's an important point to make is the more points the rowel has, usually that means the less severe it is. Now in this case, these points are very dull. They come to a very blunt end. So there's not very many of them. There's 6 points on this rowel, but because they're very blunt, it's not going to have a lot of feel. And if you're not sure, just take the spur and roll it on your hand a little bit and just see how that feels. You know, and this just, it doesn't feel like a whole lot of pressure when you put it on again, because they're not very they're really dull points, even though there's not very many. This spur has more points, but they come to a little bit more of a refined point. So this spur is actually going to be a little bit more pressure than this spur, even though it has less points. But typically, again, a spur with more points is going to have more feel. Now, these are an old set of spurs that I found laying around here, and you can see that they come to an even more of a point there. Again, they're not pointy. You know, you're not going to, leave a mark on a horse or anything like that. But this spur would have more meaning. Now, again, I don't even use these spurs. The spurs that I use day in and day out on all the horses are these ones. Again, because I like the way they sound, and yeah, the rowel just seems to work well. I'm riding a lot of green horses. I only have a couple of more advanced horses that I'm riding right now. And so most horses, even if they've not had experience with spurs, I can get on them. And when I go to put my leg on them, they're not really offended by this. So these work pretty well. So again, if you're getting started with spurs, or if you have short legs, I would recommend a short shank and a rounded rowel. That's important. And then if you have really long legs and you have a long distance to travel with your leg to make contact, you would probably want a little bit longer shank so your leg doesn't have to move quite as far every time to make contact with the horse. So I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments in the video below here, but I hope you guys have a little bit better understanding of spurs and why we use them and different kinds of spurs that are available to use, and hopefully you got something out of this video. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys on the next one.